Hey, welcome back, audience. Thanks for joining me on The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. I thought we'd have a little bit of fun as we end 2024, which has been extremely consequential. So in 4 different segments, I'm going to take you through some conversations with experts in particular fields so we can talk about the top stories of 2024. Now, I know a lot of other people do this. Maybe they do their top 10, their top whatever. But I just really wanted to talk about the top stories, good, bad, ugly, and then also delve into maybe the biggest lie that happened in their particular genre. And in this case, we're going to start out with Jim Iurio. Of course, you've heard of him before on this radio show. He's the managing director of TJM Institutional Services. He's a long time career in brokering futures. He runs the Futures Edge podcast. And probably the best thing about Jim is he's a practitioner of the economy. He doesn't just report on the economy or invest and trade in the economy because he owns Brandt's restaurant in Palatine. And so he gets to understand from the very, very lowest level what is happening. And oh, by the way, Jim, did you realize that the last mandatory minimum wage increase is happening January 1st in the state of Illinois? It's $15 now per hour. I don't know how that's going to affect your Brandt's enterprise, but that is also something people should be aware of.
No doubt about it. I mean, we are aware. And I genuinely believe that some of these policies are almost seem like they're designed to put out a lot of mom and pop restaurants and businesses, which I think they will do. Not at Brandt's. Brandt's, we have some economies of scale because we've been there so long and have such a devoted clientele. But it really is, to call it cumbersome is an understatement. We're trying to hire high school kids to give them work experience. They're not worth $15 an hour. I love you guys. If you guys are listening, I love you all. And you will be worth $15 an hour when you mature a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And, I don't know that there's really a carve out for that. Not to mention, you can't give a youth employment wage and then an adult employment wage and expect them to have the same sort of, effort towards their work at your place. I mean, it's got to be a fair level playing field because they get it too.
Yeah, of course. And restaurants will go with less staff. So service will fall down and people, the worst of the restaurant business, will get fired and then they'll have zero income. As Thomas Sowell always says, you can't change the minimum wage. The minimum wage is always zero. Anytime the government monkeys with it, you get a bad outcome. And this will be no different.
Yep. Well, Illinois likes to monkey with a lot of stuff. But let's get back to the topic at hand. And you're an expert on the economy and obviously what's happening in the stock market, which apparently has just taken a dive of a number of days. That's almost at historic levels, or am I wrong about that?
No, so yesterday's move lower after yesterday being on Wednesday when the Federal Reserve released its 25 basis point cut, but at the same time said they were concerned about inflation going higher. The stock market didn't love that, and it traded down 3.5% in one day. A market dive is a fair way to say it. Right now, it's just one day. I still think, people who are of our age will say every time the stock market starts to correct, we think of 2001 or we think of 2008. All these stock market corrections are not created equal. Sometimes you just have a nice 7-8% trim the hedges and it creates a buying opportunity. And that's more what I think this is developing into.
Well, I've got you here to talk about the biggest financial stories in 2024. One of them was the Fed. Do you want to go into that in a little more detail?
Absolutely. So for the last 2 years, we've been under this the same sort of pattern. The Fed keeps saying that they are going to lower interest rates because they believe that the interest rate is above what they call the neutral rate, meaning the rate where it's not neither accommodative to the economy or it is slowing the economy. And they still think they're above that. But the market has always believed that's the signal that the Fed has our back. We can buy stocks. And if stocks start to go lower, the Fed will probably just be easing rates. And easing rates, lower interest rates, are ultimately very, very good for the stock market. Because just think about it. Would you buy a bond to get 2%, or would you buy the stock market? Well, that's one equation. Would you buy a bond that gives 5%, or would you buy the stock market? And that's a totally different one. So anyway, so the stock market rallied on a belief that the Federal Reserve had our backs. And I think that was interesting. And I think now the stock market is saying, okay, maybe the Fed is not going to lower rates much in 2025 because there's been a resurgence in inflation. And by the way, Donald Trump, who I support and I voted for, is being viewed by the market as somewhat inflationary with tax cuts, regulatory reform, and even potentially tariffs, although I think that goes both ways. And I think the market is maybe reading that wrong. But there's a lot of interesting things going on and not all of it good.
Well, for the common user of this, should we be buoyed by the fact that perhaps our stock portfolio or our retirement will be better off, or should we be concerned more about the resurgence of inflation?
What I always tell people what I do with my investment portfolio, which is much different than what I trade on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis. I think we have a saying in markets is that bulls can make money, bears can make money, pigs get slaughtered. And what that means is if you get too greedy, you can end up losing money. So 3 weeks ago, every December, and I was very public about this too, my long-term investing money, I rebalanced. We had a tremendous year in the stock market on top of a previous tremendous year in the stock market. And if you look at your portfolio and say, well, gosh, I have too much money in stocks now, just by virtue of the fact that it rallied 30%, then you adjust back to what your risk tolerance was between stocks and bonds. And that's what I did. So I sold out a lot of my stocks at the beginning of December. I'm not even saying it was good timing so far, because again, this is one day of trading lower. But if we do trade 10% lower, I'll probably end up buying some of that back that I sold.
Okay, so the Fed, one of the big 2024 stories, and it will have implications into 2025. What else were the biggest stories financially?
I wanted to read it like Letterman, like go from the bottom up. Number three.
Sorry, I screwed up.
So have I. Number three on the list, the least of the three things, was the AI theme in the stock market, of course, led by NVIDIA, and then by the big seven, the Mag 7, whatever we call those 7 stocks that are at historic, disproportionately top heavy. They have way more of a market cap of the entire market than any 7 stocks have in history. That's pretty interesting to me. And it's not the greatest thing in the world too. When they start to correct, I think it could fuel the market correction too. But AI isn't just a stock market story. It's also a macroeconomic story, because I believe that it's going to be disinflationary. It's going to increase productivity among many companies that use it. Already increases productivity with me in my writing and some of my media things. Okay, number 2 we mentioned already was the Fed. Number 1 on the list of the most important economic themes from 2024 is the economic bullet we dodged between the dramatically disparate economic policies of 1 Kamala Harris administration and 2 of Donald Trump administration. Just when you think back at it, and think of the notion that she was planning on taxing unrealized capital gains, raising the capital gains tax to 40%, leaning on different companies to decrease their margins because evil price gougers. This was a critical moment in our nation's economy, and we voted the right way, which, by the way, I will add this. Any sort of movement from one existence to another is disruptive to markets. I think 2025 is going to be difficult. I think there's going to be inflation. I think we're going to run bigger deficits because of Donald Trump's tax cuts. But I think 2026 will be the big beneficiary of all those things. So in the short term, and I know it's easy for people like us to say it's going to be some pain, people, and I feel bad for the people who are. But again, this is the only way out of the economic quagmire we were in my opinion.
Well, you raise a good point, because the 2017 tax cuts that he first implemented and that are up for renewal by 2025, I mean, those didn't actually show any fruition until, of course, 2018 and beyond. And then they really did show. It's just a matter, unfortunately, at that point, we lost Congress to Pelosi. They hiked up the spending. And so the tax cuts never really did anything about reducing the deficit at that point. So, I mean, yeah, I think 2025 could be, just like you said, difficult. At the same time, maybe there's some optimism if we get the illegal immigration under control, if we get some of the Dodge stuff happening as well to tamp down spending, or at least the threat of it. I don't know. But would you say that we're in revolutionary times?
Oh, I think there's no question. There's never been 2 such starkly different candidates that represented 2 different camps going up against each other. And I think Donald Trump represents the opposite of it. Call it the deep state, call it the entrenched. I don't care what people call it. You've called me a conspiracy theorist, not you, for 20 years. And guess what? We're about 90% on our conspiracies coming true. I like to call it just 6 months early on these conspiracy theories. So yes, I do think Donald Trump stands in direct opposition of the entrenched bureaucrats. Is that better than deep state for you people? The entrenched bureaucrats. And I think that there is a revolution that's beginning. And with the continuing resolution or the spending bill or whatever the hell that was, I love how that played out. They were all prepared to pass it under the dark of night. And guess what happened? Twitter erupted and didn't let them do that. That was brilliant and beautiful. And that gives me a lot of hope. By the way, I sound like I'm down, like 2025 is going to be bad. I'm very, very hopeful that we are now headed in the right direction. I think the globe will notice that too, and it'll attract dollar investments from around the world, and people will buy our bonds, even though we're running up deficits in 2025, under the belief that they will be reduced in 2026.
Yeah, you bring up conspiracy theorists. Well, there's also this recent story, PolitiFact putting out its biggest lie of 2024, and that was that the Haitians were eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio. They call this the biggest lie. Obviously, it's just another dig at Trump and Vance. But what would you say is the biggest economic lie that was revealed in 2024?
By the way, this is one I didn't prepare for in the notes, but this is as easy a question for me to possibly answer. And that's the strength of the labor market. Not only is it the biggest lie of 2024, it was probably the biggest lie of 2023. So first, just on the surface, just of what the actual data they gave us was, all these increased jobs were in government, side hustles like Uber drivers, healthcare, education. It was absurd. Full-time career jobs have been declining for 2 straight years. Now, then throw in the cherry on top is that then every quarter they've come back and said, oh, all those jobs we said, yeah, they weren't really there. They did it to the tune of 880,000 jobs 3 months ago. And then they said the BLS, I'm talking about the Bureau of Labor Statistics, said they overestimated by another 200,000. That's 1 million jobs that they said were created in 2024 that weren't. Guess what? They never make errors the other way. They never come back and say, yeah, we actually did the data right and there's way more jobs. No, they in my opinion, the biggest lie was lying to make that labor market look relatively solid when it's really garbage, in my opinion.
Well, it's a similar lie that you hear from J.B. Pritzker. Let's be frank with that. I mean, he talks about all these jobs he's created, how great Illinois is doing economically. And then you find out, we have the 3rd highest unemployment rate by over 8%. All of our Midwest states are doing better than us. So, I mean, you can't trust these people to tell you the truth. You actually have to look at the data. And I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, no, and they literally work for us. I mean, we're supposed to be the boss in this relationship. If I had an employee who lied to me as consistently as they do, they would not be my employee very long. And we put up with it. And to underscore your statistics, you look at every state that surrounds us, they have more inbound immigration. And J.B. Pritzker one time came out and said, we have plenty of inbound immigration. Yeah, he was talking about illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities that are living under the bridge on Wells Street. It boggles the mind that he can stand in front of a camera and actually act like he's probably going to run for president because of the great job he's done in Illinois. These are bad times here.
Okay, last thing before I leave the conversation with you, I did want to go back to the AI thing because I saw this on Twitter and I thought it was an interesting take. And you said yourself that you're using AI and it does it absolutely enhances productivity. People are using it all the time. I know college kids are using ChatGPT and all that to write stories now and write their papers. And there's a way around it. But this was a little bit concerning. And it's, technology, just like money, it could be good or bad. It can be used the right way, or it can become a crutch and a tool. So CEO Greg Eisenberg, he basically put out this post. He said he had a fascinating lunch with a 22-year-old Stanford grad, smart kid, perfect resume. Something felt off, though. He kept pausing mid-sentence, searching for words, not complex words, basic ones, like his brain was buffering. Finally asked him if he was okay. His response floored me. Sometimes I forget words now. I'm so used to having ChatGPT complete my thoughts that when it's not there, my brain feels slower. He'd been using AI for everything, writing, thinking, communication. It had become his external brain, and now his internal one was getting weaker. I mean, this is just a one-off. I mean, I guess there is probably something to that.
Well, yeah. Okay. So, this is anecdotal. There's just as big of a chance that the kid was stoned in the interview as the ChatGPT was effective. But let's just break this down because I do find the concept fascinating. It is not any sort of radical psychological thesis to say that the easier and more complacent everything gets for us, the less we adapt to things. Every system in the body, we do workouts to break down our system and have it grow back stronger. I sit in an ice tub in my backyard to stress that system of keeping my body warm because it comes back stronger. At least that's the theory. And if it's not real, then I've sat in ice for nothing for all these years. It's really going to irritate me. But by the way, so it is not radical at all to say that if something is doing the brain work for these kids, perhaps they will not be as inclined to be able to do it themselves post that. So I think technology is great, like you said, particularly in medicine and things like that. When it's saving lives, it's fabulous. And if it frees us up from the easy tasks, provided with the implicit agreement from the user that they then will go on to more complicated mental tasks, having the easy ones being taken care of by AI. So the question to you is, will people do that? Some will, some won't, right? So a lot of people are going to be adversely affected and come out being oh gosh, can I say that word? I don't think I can. Just dumber, we'll say. It's not the way I normally talk, a little more flowery than that. It's like, it could be like the movie Idiocracy, which is a fabulous movie, by the way.
Well, I'm going to have to check that out over the
please do
over the holidays. I hadn't been that. Well, thanks a lot for your take on that. I really appreciate it, and so do my listeners. Always a great informed voice. It's Jim Iurio. Over the holidays, visit Brant's in Palatine, his establishment. Take your family out there. Great food, and obviously, we want to support conservatives like Jim.
Thank you so much, Jeannie.
Merry Christmas. Thanks for being on my program.